From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined by our delightful, highly respected, just love to be around them, panel of Express News sports editor Nick Talbot, Spurs beat writer Jeff McDonald, and my favorite person in the whole world, just a delightful guy, just a wonderful guy, always thinking of others, always prepared for everything. The past 10 minutes leading up to this podcast have just been a love fest. Tom Orsborn, Spurs beat writer, how are you doing this fine morning?
Good. Thank you, Mike. Doing well. Just getting off 2 weeks of vacation. So that's my mindset right now, kind of just shaking the cobwebs out.
And this whole podcast thing went smoothly again, preparing for it. It's been awesome.
Where'd you go on vacation?
Nowhere.
Awesome.
Glad to have the group around. And
that's my favorite place.
As we get started, I want to point out to the listeners that if you want to join us from your secure location, wherever it may be, on this highly secure network, you're going to have the opportunity to join us live via highly secure network on Thursday, June 13th at 10 a.m. Central Time. We're going to all be on a Zoom together. The crew is going to be mainly in one secure location. Some of us will be on outposts around the state. But if you wanted to ask a question of Jeff McDonald or Tom Orsborn, you're going to have the chance to do so by signing up for a Zoom. It's Express News in Vivo. There's going to be a way for you to do that in the show notes. Our producer, Monty Bach, has them in the show notes, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just click on that link in the show notes, and you can sign up to ask whatever you want of Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn and the rest of us. Jeff, are you looking forward to this? Hanging with the people, hanging with the listeners, hanging with even the shut-ins. This is going to be a big day Thursday morning.
I really am. I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah.
So everyone should sign up and ask Tom questions and Mike Finger questions.
No, I'm looking forward to it. We could talk about the draft. I think it's being billed by our marketing team, great marketing team, as a chance to find out what the Spurs are going to do with the number 4 and number 8 picks. So I guess we can use this podcast today as a chance to figure that out, because I'm not sure we have that answer yet. If that's what people are going to be asking us, we need to be prepared to tell them what they're going to do with the number 4 and number 8 picks. And I'm going to start with Jeff, because that's going to be the big question on Thursday morning. Do you have an answer yet?
Oh, no, I surely do not. Here's what I think: they need to draft like 2 really good players that can really help them take the next step in the Wemby project, or else trade those picks, trade up, or else.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The first part of that answer, as sarcastic as it was not obvious, because they don't have to make the picks if they don't want to. They might be trading them. And I will just start.
But I doubt it. Right.
I will start this in a serious fashion, unlike our usual podcast manager, and say that I think that they should make both picks. This might be controversial. It might be a hot take, but I'll explain my reasoning for this. There has been talk out there, rumblings, that the Spurs could package 2 picks together and move up to number 1, number 2. Here's why I don't think that's what they're going to do. Here's why I doubt it's what they should do. This is a draft where there is no clear number 1 pick. There might not be a clear top 2 picks. Right now, a lot of the mock drafts around the league have the 2 French guys as the number 2 picks, Zachary Ricochet and Alex Sarr. But those aren't slam dunk, clear-cut number 1, number 2 picks. So in a year when there isn't that guy, like, why not take 2 stabs at it at 4 and 8? You might find the best player in the draft at 4. You might find the best player in the draft at 8. Take 2 swings unless you really, 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 really are convinced that there's one guy that you want more than any other guy. In that case, I guess you can trade up, but I'm not sure the Spurs feel that way about any one player. And if you don't feel that way about any one player, then take 2 swings. That's my take on this right now.
Yeah, that wasn't a hot take at all.
Well, I was being so.
That's just very cool, calm, and rational. Makes a lot of sense to me, for once.
Yeah, Tom, what do you think?
I hate to say this, but I side with you, Mike. Yeah, I side with you.
If only the listeners could have listened to the lead up to this podcast this morning. That's all I'm going to say. It was a love fest.
We did record it.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think
Tom and I worked through a lot this morning before this podcast. It's all leading up to the peak on Thursday when the fans are going to be out there with us. They're just going to see us get along swimmingly. And I think it's something that all teams just work through. Chemistry issues. You got to air it out in the locker room before you take it out to the court.
It was Kobe Shaq there for a second. It was Kobe Shaq. One of y'all was going to have to be traded, I think.
Yeah.
I think they're taking Castle at 4.
I agree with my man Tom. And I was going to get to this over the course of the podcast, and we want to save some of these big hot takes for Thursday. But here's, again, I'm going to get this back on track in a professional way, because I know people come to us for professional analysis. I've got my draft board here in my secure location. And are we going to take this seriously or not? Jeff considers himself above all this draft board stuff. What the heck else are we going to talk about? Like, you're making fun of me for being prepared.
I'm just picturing your secure location with a big draft board on it.
Yeah.
Like you're Brian Wright or something.
Yeah. I mean, Brian Wright calls, and that's what I think. When Brian Wright texts me from his Apple Watch and asks for my opinion, I got to be ready.
All right, you can we can do this, but can I start with a preface? Nobody knows what these people are going to do. There've been exactly 3 times in Spurs history where everyone knew, that's what they're going to do with their pick, and it's when they drafted Tim Duncan, David Robinson, and Victor Wembanyama. After that, we have our hunches. We have our hunches. We have our
incorrect.
I think.
What about Dan McCarney? Dan McCarney called like a second rounder one year.
No, it was the first. It was the first rounder.
Okay.
It was Nikola Mulatinov.
Didn't Finger pick Jeremy Sohan?
I picked Jeremy Sohan.
But there's a difference between thinking, saying like, I think this is who they should take. I think this is who they might take. And like, because I'm talking about, like, you read all these, if you get on Spurs Twitter, people read all these little aggregator sites, every little tidbit, and think they know, and nobody knows anything. Because the Spurs are looking at everything, and like, it's not going to get out. It never does.
So what are you? You know who they're interviewing? You know who they're who they're bringing?
Right.
They're bringing in. I don't understand why you're trying to undermine this discussion by
I'm more talking about
by rendering it pointless.
We're
trying to sell this podcast again. We're trying to bring Taco Palenque back.
We're
trying to get people to listen.
I don't mean that it's pointless. Like, it's fun to talk about.
Speaking of point, let's go back to Castle. Why do you think?
Before I was undermined.
We're on the same page here.
Before I was sabotaged, I'm now a Tom Orsborn fan. Like on this podcast,
you've always been a Tom Orsborn fan on this podcast. Everyone,
that's true. But on my board, to get to Tom's excellent point about Stephon Castle, the number 4. Let's just assume they're going to keep the picks because I think they should. I think they will. They're going to make their number 4 and number 8 picks. Number 4. I think that there could be a list of guys, including Stephon Castle, Reed Shepard, Matas Buzelis, and maybe even Donovan Clingan. Those are the most well-regarded guys who I think might be available with the number 4 pick. And I think that who they take it for will play into who they take at 8. Like, you don't necessarily want 2 big guys with those 2 picks. You don't necessarily want 2 point guards. But given those four guys available, like I thought this during the NCAA tournament. I'm thinking this more and more since the end of the NCAA tournament that Stephon Castle just screams Spur to me. He might not be a point guard. Like he's not going to be a Trey Jones prototypical bring the ball up the court, initiate offense, look to pass type of guy. But I think he's got enough of that in him that you can play some point guard in this league. I think he does all kinds of fun stuff on the wing. He's a really, really good defender, and he's proven to be a winning player. That makes me sound like an old man, sports writer, cliche guy. But like he was the best player on the court at times for the team that was by far the best squad in college basketball this year. I think he fits in. He can play you some point guard. He can play you some shooting guard. He can guard some small forwards. And I just think he has that upside there. And because of his versatility, if you take Stephon Castle, you can take pretty much anybody with that number 8 pick. You can go to a point guard type who I think they really like, Devin Carter from Providence, who is a really good college player. You could take both Castle and Carter and have them both play some point guard for you. Or you can go to like a Tijan Salon, the French guy who they've been connected to, a Cody Williams from Colorado. I think that gives you options. Conversely, like I don't love the idea of taking Donovan Clingan because Victor Wembanyama played so much better this year at center. And when he played alongside Zach Collins, he didn't play as well. And Clingan, I don't know. There's something to like about having two huge guys anchor a defense for the next 15 years. That could work, but I don't love it. If you do take a guy like that, then you take a point guard with the second pick.
When's the last two really big guys really worked in the NBA though?
Yeah, it's like I think it sounds cool in theory, and if they take him, like Klingen's a top 3 type talent according to all evaluators. I understand if they take him. That's just, for me, that's not where I'd go.
Yeah,
right now.
The Twin Towers thing is, I don't know that it works so much in the modern NBA unless you have like two Victor Wembanyamas. Then that would be really interesting to me. But just having just versatility is important in the modern NBA. And being able to guard multiple positions is important, and being able to make a shot outside of 15 feet is important. And you can't have too many guys that don't do that on the floor.
I think it should be pointed out with Castle, pun intended there, pointed out that he emphasized at the combine over and over again that it's point guard or bust for him. Now, that's not to say he won't, he is versatile, but he really wants to be a point guard and play for a team that doesn't have a starting point guard.
Right.
So in that sense, I think he fits with the Spurs too. And his size is so, 6'6", 210. He's a pretty good defender, a high ceiling defender. I think you just add it all up and, throw in what Finger said. What Mike Finger said, I just think it points to him. Again, pun intended, it points to him.
Now, if Brian Wright, R.C. Buford, Greg Popovich all agree with us here, with Tom and I, about how great Stephon Castle is, how well he'd fit, and if you're worried that, say, the Rockets are going to take him at 3, or that he goes earlier, like, do you love him that much where you start to think about trading up and maybe not trading both picks to move up to 3 to get him, but trade the number 4 and some type of player or future consideration to get him? Or do you that's interesting to me. If they target a guy that they like, and I'm not saying, I doubt that you put both 4 and 8 together to move up in this draft. But do you trade 4 plus something in the future to move up one spot? Like, do you like Stephon Castle that much, or do you just accept whoever falls to us at 4, whoever falls to us at 8, we're going to take that guy? What do you think?
The latter sounds more Spurs-like, and I don't know they like Castle, that much to
right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good question.
But those are all options that could come up on draft night.
As with everything, it's hard to answer your question without knowing specifics. Like, are we talking you trade the fourth to move up to 3, the fourth and like one of those 4 of those 7,000 future second round picks that you have? Like, is that enough to get it done? If it is, sure. Like those second round picks that the Spurs have in the future at this point are they're like pennies. Like they just have them laying around. So they're
or it could be like a far off like 2030 first rounder. Like that might be excessive, but you're thinking that in those days you're going to be competing for championships and maybe your 2030 first rounder will be in the 20s. So there's all kinds of levels to this, and to Jeff's point, we can't speculate on specifics without knowing exactly like who the Hawks take with the first pick. Do the Hawks keep the first pick?
I guess in general, I don't know that I love someone so much in this draft that I'm going to trade much to move up.
But here's what happens.
It's a little bit maybe, but
here's what happens in draft rooms and even with like fans and sports writers when you start analyzing these guys and the decision makers with the Spurs. It's a huge room of guys who know what they're doing. Dave Tellup, one of their main scout guys, like he sees everybody. On down their college scouts, they see everybody. They've been scouting internationally for years. They've probably been watching Matas Buzelis since he was 15 years old. What happens as we get closer and closer is you start to sort of fall in love with a guy, and maybe irrationally, and you hope that in the room that's sort of counterbalanced by reason. But I sort of get how, just in the course of this podcast, we're talking about how great Stephon Castle would be with them. And if you panic the night of the draft and think, oh my God, Houston's going to take him at 3, like I understand the impulse there to this guy we spent all this time on might be slipping away. I get it. Like you've got to strike a balance between trusting your evaluation and valuing a guy and realizing that maybe you're overpaying. So, and I think that's for every team in every draft goes through situations like that. You hope that cooler heads prevail. You hope you make the right choice. But again, this is also why I'm so in favor of keeping both picks and not doing something rash and trading up for one of those French guys at 1 or 2 who might be great. But that's where I lean towards the more conservative approach here.
I think that's right. The issue that you can use if you really need an excuse and you get too in love with one of these guys, just look at whatever they're lacking, because almost every single one of them lacks something.
Right.
If you want to not fall in love with Stephon Castle, look at his 3-point percentage. Right. 26.7% last year from 3. And, so there's going to be something with each one of those guys that make them not want to be drafted at the high, because this draft isn't very strong. So that's more than anything why you stay at 4 and 8.
Yeah, exactly. You can
have 2 lottery tickets, because there's not. I don't think anyone's in love with any of these guys, to be honest. That's the problem. That's the problem with this draft. There's no one to fall in love with. I mean, maybe scouting them since they were 15, but there's going to be a cooler head to prevail in that room because they're the Spurs.
Yeah,
it's easy. It's easy to sour grapes your way with people when it's like you said, Castle went 3rd. Well, we didn't really want him anyway because he could shoot. And you can do that like you said with every guy.
Yeah,
every guy's
only made one of those picks where they just fell in love with the guy and picked him too high, and that didn't work out too well.
Yeah. Again, like we talked about this on the podcast before, you go back many, many years of them drafting in the late 20s, in the late teens, on into the lottery. Like there's been very few times when the pick they've taken has not proved worthy of that selection in the draft. On through the DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson years, all those guys exceeded their draft position. Jeremy Sohan's pretty close. Devin Vassell, you could have taken Tyrese Halliburton instead, but Devin Vassell was still worthy of being taken. He's one of the top 10 players in that draft. The one mistake, as Nick was alluding to, is Josh Primo. And that was sort of the reach that didn't work out. Luka Samanic probably didn't work out, but their batting average is pretty dang high.
They got Keldon late in that draft.
Yeah, you could have swapped. I thought they could have swapped Keldon and Samanic.
And people can say what they want about Keldon Johnson, but you do a redraft of that draft, and he's taken probably 10 spots higher.
Yeah,
so that as Nick said, cooler heads usually do prevail in that draft room. They usually know what they're doing. I just think when they're picking higher in the draft, it seems like the stakes are a little bit higher and the mistakes are magnified a bit more.
That's fair.
Which goes with the territory. When you're picking 4th overall, and a future All NBA Hall of Famer gets taken 5th, you're gonna have to live with that forever. But I'm not sure that's gonna happen this year.
As we detailed on the last podcast, though, like if you look at the history of top 10 picks, like most of them don't work out.
Correct.
Most of them don't,
especially like in the 5
almost
to 10
at all.
range. In the 5 to 10 range, there's a lot of busts. Like there's more busts than success stories, even in the 5 to 10 range. It's kind of crazy.
When the Mavericks got from 5 to 3, it worked out pretty well. Although the guy at 5 was pretty good too, but not Luka Doncic.
Yeah. And anybody enjoying the NBA Finals? Speaking of Luka Doncic, I know Jeff doesn't watch basketball. But,
shut up. I mean,
Mavericks fans probably aren't, but
I just like Derek White again getting his flowers.
Yeah,
I think that's nice.
We're recording this early. I think Monty's going to send this out to everybody's digital players on Wednesday to keep on our usual schedule. We're recording this the morning after Game 2, and Derek White doing Derek White things that we've seen him do since very early in his Spurs tenure. He was one of those guys that kind of like Danny Green, never giving up on those transition defensive opportunities. Where he'd have his chase down blocks. He had a huge one last night, and he got a little bit of the hand there. It might have been a foul, but just the effort there. That was a prototypical Derek White play that sealed the NBA Finals victory. Just cool to see. I know, Tom, you always love talking to Derek.
Had a steal, a block, a 3 in the final 3 minutes. It's huge.
Yeah.
And just to put the Spurs spin on it, he was drafted. Do we remember? Was he 29th as well?
I believe so.
29th that year. That was at a time when Brian Wright was still the assistant GM. RC still had that title, but Brian was the guy that was really pushing Derek in that draft. Like he's the guy that really identified and championed the kid from the cooking school. So give Brian Wright a little credit for knowing what he's doing, knowing what he's seeing.
That's not popular these days. Brian Wright. That's the if you're online, you need to talk about how he's useless. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Then he traded him.
He traded him, and I don't understand. Even I think it's a fake controversy.
Yes.
I just said something nice about Derek White on the internet last night, and then people were like, everyone says that the Spurs shouldn't have traded him. I don't think anybody's saying that. No. I think that's manufactured. I think that everyone, even the most ridiculous fans out there, understand that you had to make that trade. You got first rounder out of it. You got stuff that still could pay off. Like Blake Wesley hasn't been a world beater yet, but you still have second rounders in the future. You still have stuff that you can show for it, and you got Victor Wembanyama out of it.
Yeah, I suppose in retrospect, everyone could argue now that we see what Derek has become, like a key part of that Celtics. Two Celtics finals teams. Like they probably don't make the finals those years without Derek White. Like, so he's really important and valuable to Celtics. So I suppose in retrospect, in hindsight, you can argue they should have got more for him.
Right. But
that's all a hindsight argument.
What's funny is immediately after that draft,
all the Celtics fans hated it.
All the Celtics fans hated it. The Celtics fan sites were going crazy.
We traded first round picks for a nobody.
Yeah. And it ended up being huge. That's an interesting draft. I'm looking at it now. And there are multiple busts in the top 10, as there always are. Uh, actually, it's not like Frankie Ntilikina. Frankie Smokes is up there at eighth overall. Jonathan Isaac's been okay. Markelle Fultz was in first pick and has underachieved. But the end of the draft was really good. Like, you know who was taken right after Derek White? The Spurs took Derek White 29th. Utah took Josh Hart 30th. Josh Hart's become a pretty good player.
There you go.
Kyle Kuzma was taken 27th. OG Anunoby was taken 23rd. Jared Allen was taken 22nd. That was a hell of a draft.
Basically, what you're saying is the bottom 10 picks are probably more valuable than the top 10.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty close. There was De'Aaron Fox and Jason Tatum were in the top 10. So, Laurie Markkinen, who some people are talking about as maybe a future Spur, it's in the top 10. It was pretty balanced draft. It was kind of a coin toss as to whether you wanted to pick 28th or 4th, which I think a lot of drafts turn out that way. But yeah, Derek White, not good for Derek White. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? I do want to mention many thanks, and Nick can chime in on this. First of all, many thanks to Nick Talbot, member of our podcast team here, who did a heck of a job with the Alamo City High School Sports Awards, which was a wonderful event. We got to honor 300 and something local athletes, Nick, is that right? Almost 300?
Yeah, a little over 300.
From all kinds of sports. They all had a wonderful time. David Hinojosa, all of them, just the way that all these kids admire the work that David does. That's awesome. Ronald Herod wasn't there, but he played a big role in it. Jeff Perkins. Great night. And the reason I bring this up on a Spurs podcast is, like last year, we asked Keldon Johnson to come out. He graciously did it. Trey Jones is another guy who says yes to everything. The Spurs love having him do stuff in the community, a big community guy. And Nick, you can speak to this, but we just wanted him to do one quick interview and give out 2 or 3 awards, right? That's all we really asked of him.
Yep, and he insisted about everything.
He insisted on being up there for an hour and a half. He posed for a photo with 300 kids for an hour and a half. Gave out every award we had of his own volition on his night off on a Sunday night. I thought that was really cool of Trey Jones, because it meant so much to these high school kids to be able to say, here is a San Antonio Spur, starting point guard, guy who throws lobs to Victor Wembanyama, taking the time to, and he, like, it wasn't just a handshake and go. He had conversations with these kids. Just it was really cool to see that up close and personal. And I was asked to do a little Q&A with him on the stage there. He was great in that. And when I went up there, I asked how he was holding up, and he said, man, my legs are killing me, because he'd been standing there for an hour and a half on his night off. And we had a fun little conversation there about, like, he felt more tired than after a Greg Popovich practice. But really cool of Trey Jones to do that for us the way that Keldon did last year. Yeah. Nick, you were up there with him most of the night too. He just seemed like he really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, he asked, like, every time I handed out the kid an award to kid, because I was giving him the award, so he didn't have to figure out which award to give out. He would always ask me about the kid every time they come. Oh yeah, what's the deal with this one? Or this person's going this person. He was really excited about Ariana Roberson, who is going to Doak, of course. He himself, that really got him jazzed up.
And she's taller than he is.
Much taller than he is, about 3 inches.
I was going to ask,
and she had some heels on too, so it made it even worse.
Right.
I was going to ask in the group photo how many of the high school kids were taller than Trey Jones.
There were a few. And here's another thing: high school kids look so much older than they used to me. Like, that's weird because I'm an old man, but some of these athletes look like they're 22-year-olds. Like, it's something else. There's some. Our publisher, Mark Medici, talked about how, San Antonio is a huge city, one of the top 10 population-wise in the country, and the kids out there who won awards should take pride in not just being one of the best athletes in San Antonio, but one of the best athletes in the country. And after seeing them all night. Like that's true. There's some world-class athletes in that room. That was great to see. Great night for the community and for the city.
Did the Hennes take home any awards?
They did not. We came up.
They've gone downhill since in the last 30 years or so, I hear.
I believe so, yeah.
They
went state since then.
Talking about Trey's involvement, what it means to those kids, takes me back to 1976. The seventh grader at Blessed Sacrament Parish School, our athletic banquet, the guest speaker at that banquet was one George Karl.
Wow.
Yes. My favorite Spur up in the 70s. So it was a real thrill to see George Karl with his puka shell necklace mingling with us kids. Gave a great speech, signed autographs later. Several years afterward, I reminded him that he didn't remember it, but he said, "Oh, I did those things all the time." So it's a Spurs tradition.
Yeah.
And then mentioning Keldon Johnson, I had a good time with him before vacation doing a story about his involvement with young boxer David Cardenas. And I bring that up because with Keldon, there's been guys that have immersed themselves in the community in various ways, but what I like about Keldon is he does it so much at the grassroots level, true man of the people.
And when you talk to people with the Spurs, there's two of them, and this is not to cast any negative light on any other person in that locker room, but when you are a Spurs marketing person, PR person, anybody with the Spurs, and you need a player to go do something in the community, like the two guys who, from everything that I've heard, always say yes are Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones. Like those are the easy yeses, and that doesn't win you championships. And I realize that the listeners out there care about winning. But it's not so easy with a guy like Tom. Like Tom mentioned, Keldon has immersed himself in the city like few guys do. Like he is San Antonio to the bone.
And not at a high profile level, but really, like I said, he's out there with the people.
It's not fake. That's what you're saying.
Not fake.
It's not fake.
It's not fake. And that doesn't win you NBA championships, but I think that has value in building a team. And then and kind of just I think that has more value than people think. And I think it's worth our while, especially on an off-season edition of the Spurs Insider podcast, to shout some of these guys out for.
And I would say, especially in a smaller market, that has value. Like so many smaller markets that have like this inferiority complex. Like nobody wants to be here. Nobody really wants to come here. The Spurs can never sign a big free agent, but to have guys that obviously like it here and fall in love with the city and immerse themselves in the city, it does mean something.
Yeah, it definitely does. Before we go, I'm going to do one more self-indulgent anecdote shout out to, and if you bear with me, as I've mentioned on here before, probably too much people are sick of hearing about it. I do play a little pickup basketball still at my ripe old age. And it's a good game. We got a good mix. It's a game that's been together. I've been going for 15 years or so. Same spot. Secure location. Don't try to find it. Highly secure. We got a mix of old guys like me. We got college kids coming in and out. Good mix. And the last month or so, there's been a couple of twins, like young twins, early 20s, college age, both like 6'3", 6'4", super athletic, can run and jump, nice guys. And one of them came up to me last week and said, "Are you Mike Finger?" And I was sort of taken aback by this because that's not my target demographic. I've usually, like, people in their early 20s don't care about old newspaper writers, right? So I said, "Yeah, I'm Mike Finger. What's up?" And he said, "My dad loves your podcast," which was just perfect to me. Like that, and I laughed, and that made all the sense in the world. The dad is the one that likes a podcast. So shout out to Marcello's dad. I really appreciate it. Glad to know that dads out there are enjoying the Spurs Insider.
Coolest dad in the world listens to podcasts.
Yes. But for a minute there, I was like, hey, I might be cool with the kids. And then it was like, no, my dad likes your podcast. So that was fun. Glad to know people are listening. Anything else before we go? Again, in the show notes, there's a link to sign up for our in vivo Zoom session on Thursday morning, June 13th at 10 a.m. Join us for VIP interviews, fascinating Q&As, and on-the-record discussions of topical issues.
This could be like an AMA, right?
Record discussions.
Well,
that's on the record.
I guess that's a description of our in vivo series. But this will be an on-the-record discussion of.
Our thing is going to be sort of like an AMA, right? You can ask us anything. It doesn't have to be about the draft. You can ask us anything Spurs related if you want.
And honestly, it might help to not ask about the draft because, there's only so much we can say. We sort of covered it here. We'll cover it more. But feel free to ask Jeff about all kinds of stuff happening in his life, in his many years covering the Spurs. Same thing with Tom. It'll be fun. We'll see you then. Anything else anybody wants to add before we go? I didn't think so.
No, I'm good.
Go ahead, Tom. I just want to apologize. Earlier this day, my temper got out of hand. That rarely happens with me, and Mike took the brunt of it. So I just want to apologize for that.
Well, how they say if
you're coming off a vacation, it's you're kind of tender. I don't know.
There's the saying where if you go around all day and you run into a bunch of beeholes, then you're the beehole. But if you just run into one beehole, he's probably the beehole, if you know what I mean.
So you're saying that about me?
Yeah.
My quota of beeholes has been taken up already.
I think our quota of using the term beehole is way over our limit. But until feel free to bring up all this on Thursday with us on the in vivo on the Zoom. Sign up for that. We're really looking forward to it. Should be a fun time.
And just a reminder, it will be on the record.
It'll be on the record. And until we see you then, take care of each other and keep it real.